Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about the breaking news regarding Volodymyr Zelensky. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, there's reports coming out that Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine has confirmed that his British and EU backers have asked him to show some restraint regarding attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Now, I've just done a video on this. I think it was released earlier this morning. But for me, the logic of Zelensky's actions were lost. They were lost on me completely. Because this idiot decides during an oil crisis to go and bomb oil infrastructure in a country he is at war with. Now, the larger ramifications for this are he is fighting a war and his war has become irrelevant. On the back of what is going on in Iran, Ukraine has now been shoved not to the back burner, it's actually out of the kitchen altogether. So this moron's solution to the problem is to attack Russian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, to bring his Ukraine war back into the forefront. Now I'll show you why this is the most moronic thing that he could do. Donald Trump has lifted sanctions on Russian oil. So the reason he's done this is because the Straits of Hormuz are being affected and Russian oil coming into the market will help try and mitigate some of the price increases that oil is currently going through. So it's a measure to try and stabilize the oil market and the price of oil. Keir Starmer has allowed for Russian oil tankers sailing in UK waters to now be boarded. However, there's an article where I think there's something like 5 or 6 Russian oil tankers within or just off the English Channel that are being left untouched. The bigger political ramifications from this are that should the oil prices continue to surge and should the Iran war continue to escalate, it doesn't bode well for Donald Trump as he goes into the midterms in the winter. Now, on the face of it, it would be great that the oil prices are rising because whatever oil the Russians do put out into the market, they're receiving top dollar for it. Reciprocally, the Americans are now the largest net producers of oil. So the American oil companies will do well. However, politically, it's a suicide mission for Donald Trump. And that is why Zelensky is now being reined in. Because as much as Europe and the UK want to posture against Donald Trump, their hands are tied. You heard Marco Rubio at the G7. He told Kaya Kallas when she complained about the Americans not becoming actively involved in Ukraine. He said to her in no uncertain terms, and I paraphrase, if you think you're capable of doing a better job, we'll stand aside. By all means, go ahead and do it.
Tensions within the West have come into sharp focus. At a high-stakes G7 foreign ministers meeting in France, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kallas reportedly clashed over Washington's approach to the Russia-Ukraine war. According to Axios, the exchange exposed growing divisions between the US and its European allies. The flashpoint came as Callas questioned why the US had not increased pressure on Moscow despite stalled peace efforts. The remark reflected mounting frustration in Europe over what many see as Washington's limited push against Russia.
A year has passed, and Russia has not moved. When will your patience run out?
Rubio responded sharply, defending US efforts and signaling limits to Washington's role. His reaction underscored a broader message. If Europe wants a tougher line, it may need to act independently.
We are doing everything we can to end the war. If you think you can do it better, please, we will step aside.
Despite the tension, European ministers reportedly urged the US to stay engaged, highlighting continued reliance on American diplomacy. Meanwhile, Moscow has pushed its own narrative. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed Washington is already working to secure Kyiv's acceptance of prior US-Russia understandings, while blaming Europe for prolonging the conflict.
The U.S. side is doing everything in its power to secure Kiev's agreement. The prolongation of the conflict is largely explained by this subversive policy of the European Union and NATO leadership.
As divisions widen, the G7 exchange signals a deeper fracture, raising questions over unity, strategy, and who ultimately shapes the path to ending the war.
Now, this goes to show you the immaturity, the stupidity, and the lack of intelligence that our politicians have. Again, Annalena Baerbock, Kaya Kallas, Keir Starmer, Sadiq Khan, they're all a bunch of morons. The collective IQ between Europe and the UK at the moment politically, I'd wager to say that 2 would be an exceptional number, because these idiots have no clue what is going on. They are so deluded that they prepared to shoot themselves in the foot by Zelensky going on this march. So I suspect pressure has come down from Washington, and the EU backers and the UK backers are now saying to Zelensky, you need to ease off. Because you have to remember, energy prices are soaring. Europe is facing the brunt of this. The Americans can pull out of the Strait of Hormuz, walk away. 3% of their oil comes from the Gulf. They'll pivot, they'll do business with the Russians. Furthermore, Vladimir Putin has agreed in principle that he is prepared to trade in dollars. This is a big blow for the BRICS currency plans. This is a big blow for the Chinese. This is a big blow for BRICS. Because the Russians embracing the US dollar again for international trade is right up there as a win for Donald Trump. Furthermore, it helps Donald Trump drive a wider wedge between the Russians and the Chinese. So Zelensky behaving in this childish manner is helping nobody. Now I've got 2 articles, one from United 24. It says Zelensky confirms partner request to reduce strikes on Russian oil facilities amid energy crisis. And the BBC, Zelensky says allies asked him to scale back attacks on Russian energy. Volodymyr Zelensky has said Ukraine's allies have urged him to scale back attacks on Russian energy infrastructure amid the ongoing global fuel crisis, but that they would only end if Russia stopped targeting Ukraine first. This moron is so bloody deluded, it's not funny. Because a moron like this on the world stage is really dangerous. Really dangerous. I won't be surprised if his people or MI6, the CIA, get rid of him. I will not be surprised. The longer he continues in this erratic manner, the more evident his uselessness becomes. And eventually, when nobody has use for him, that's when he's going to meet his maker. It is unclear which countries he may have been referring to. China and India remain heavily dependent on Russian oil and the EU on Russian gas. China and India do not dictate to Zelensky. They care not about Zelensky. Zelensky is this minuscule grain of salt in the world cog of politics. So when again, this is the duplicitous nature of the BBC. China and India, they've got nothing to do with the Ukraine war. They've wiped their hands off it. Zelensky is backed by the Europeans and the UK. That's it. So come out and call a spade a spade. We have received messages from some of our partners asking us how our responses against Russia, Russia's oil sector, the energy sector, can be reduced, Zelensky said in a voice message. Partners. Zelensky's only partners are the United States. Well, that's probably becoming non-existent. But his only partners are the EU and the United Kingdom. They're the two powers that are currently keeping this Ukraine conflict alive. Had it not been for the United Kingdom and the Europeans, it would have ended a long time ago. You heard the Prime Minister of Belgium when he came out saying that it is time that Europe sat down and did a deal with the Russians because cheap Russian energy is good for Europe. Kaja Kallas cut him down to size. So as long as you have these morons in there, as long as you have Ursula von der Leyen willing to hold Zelensky's hand and do a run through the gardens, promising him all this unfettered access to money that they are taking from their own populace and giving to this idiot so that he can steal it to go and put it away somewhere. As long as these idiots are in power, this Ukraine conflict continues, and all the while innocent Ukrainians are dying. So again, I urge you, go and have a look at these articles because it's quite telling. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist or somebody with a PhD or a master's or an honors in order to understand that by attacking the Russian oil infrastructure, you help drive the price of oil up. Now, if you're looking for sympathy in the world because of your cause and because you claim that the Russians are attacking you and they're the aggressors and you are this holier than thou person and your country is, the one country on the planet that is without blame and, the world should bow down and bend the knee to you, then pushing the price of oil and energy up doesn't help you achieve that goal. In fact, it makes you more of a pariah. But then again, this is what this idiot deserves. He deserves to be outed for the pariah that he is, and he deserves to be removed because he is a dictator. He has put a stay on elections in Ukraine, all the while blaming it on the war. He refuses to sit down and get into a negotiated settlement to end the war with the Russians. So by that, he keeps perpetuating the war so that he doesn't have to have an election because he knows in an election he'll be voted out. And he knows once he's voted out, he becomes insignificant. And he knows that once he's voted out and he's insignificant and a deal is done with the Russians where territory is ceded to the Russians, the neo-Nazis that he's been in bed with for the entirety of this war, the neo-Nazis that he did a deal with when he lied to the Ukrainian people because he was voted in on a 70% plus mandate to come in and make peace with Russia. Yet he did the opposite. Remember Victoria Nuland? Victoria Nuland walking through Kiev, giving people candy and biscuits and at the Maidan? All those people have gone on. They've taken their cut and they're living happily. This idiot, when land is ceded, when the Russians have taken what they wanted, this idiot is going to be taken out by his own people. The Azov battalion are going to come knocking and they're going to demand their pound of flesh. So before MI6, before the CIA, before any intelligence agency gets to Zelensky, the neo-Nazis will have done the job. In fact, they'll probably do it on behalf of these intelligence agencies. His man Zelensky is sitting here in London biding his time as an ambassador. There's going to come a time where Zelensky is going to be put forward. And it's going to be at the expense of Zelensky. You saw who was there to meet him at the airport when he landed in the United Kingdom last week. Zelensky was there front and center to meet him. The second person to shake hands with Zelensky was Zelensky. The writing is on the wall. This guy is in a fight for the survival, for his survival, his very existence. So I urge you, have a look at this. Frankly, I can't see the reasoning behind Zelensky's actions other than he's just, running helter-skelter. So I want to thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow. Once again, you might not agree with everything I say. You might not agree with some of what I say. It's important to get a dialogue going and to understand, because at the end of the day, it's the populace in these various countries that are affected by the decisions of these heartless, narcissistic politicians. So it's time some change did happen, because I don't know how long pensioners in Britain are going to go without gas, without heating, without food, without proper services, while everybody else comes and milks the system for what it's worth. And it's a template that plays out all over Europe and in other parts of the world. So again, get the dialogue going, because what each person says is largely immaterial. It's important to get a dialogue going so that some change can be effected, some positive change for the people can be effected.